The Clay County Commission to order. We will begin with our invocation. Reverend Smith, when you are prepared, please proceed.
Would you join me in prayer? Lord, we thank you. We praise you today, Lord, for all of your goodness. We take this moment, Lord, to remember all that you've done for us. And we take this moment, Lord, to lift up families and individuals in our community that may be hurting and need our help today. Lord, give us the wisdom and the knowledge to know how to meet those needs. We pray for our community, its schools, its leadership. Lord, that you would protect, that you would watch over them and continue to lead and guide. We pray for this business session tonight, Lord, that you would give direction, you give your wisdom, Lord, to its leadership and to this county. We pray for the leaders of the county, Lord, that they would sense and find your guidance, Lord, as you lead them day by day. And Lord, we also pray for your provision, Lord, that you would provide in the ways that you seek best, Lord. And finally, Lord, we want to ask you for your grace, your love that would be present tonight. May the words we speak and the actions that are taken bring hope and healing and unity in our community. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nolte? Here. Commissioner Withington?
Here.
Commissioner Lawson? Here. Commissioner Wagner?
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson? Here. Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Move to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion's been made for the approval of the agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Date, March 4th, 2023. Come now, inhabitants of Clay County. Oh, sure. Sorry. I'm Marion McSpadden, Clay County, Missouri. Date, March 4th, 2023. Come now, inhabitants of Clay County, by absolute writ of habeas corpus and with absolute resolve rebut all corporate authority. County Settlement Covenant in Clay County, Original Assembly and Library of Records on date, March 4th, 2023, gives this county a settlement announcement, Clay County Settlement Covenant, and in harmony with 114 counties we find, and in all 50 states we find. Article 1, by Almighty God, granting us freedom by unanimous decree, the local peoples in local, peaceful, lawful assembly in settlement covenant in Missouri, a free and independent nation, equal state, a member with other free and independent states, also known as Republic for the United States of America, set forth the following affirmations. Section 1, local people and family of man and woman centered in Almighty God live on local land and use way land in people jurisdiction in Grays, affirmed by the authority of the unanimous Declaration of Independence, circa 1776, and Bill of Rights Articles the 1st, the 5th, the 7th, the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, and circa 1787 to 1791 to 2010 and beyond the reach of predator others, and also living in friendship and in peace, treaties circa 1789 to 1791 and beyond the reach of predator others, and also affirmed by Article 5 of the Judicial Power, Sections 4, 6, 8, 17, circa 1820, Missouri Constitution and the Covenant of Missouri, a free and independent nation, state, circa 2021. This entire document may be viewed at the Clay County Records Librarian or by email at info@missouriDejure.org or mail at 2464 Taylor Road, Suite 112, Wildwood, Missouri 63040. There are 13 pages total to this document. Notice to agents is notice to principals. Notice to principals is notice to agents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to address the commission? Seeing none. That brings us to our consent agenda. Administrator, and by the way, any commissioner has the availability to remove any issue from consent to have it considered independently if they so see fit. Proceed.
The consent agenda allows the Commission to act upon items considered to be routine and approved in one motion. These may include items that have been reviewed by the Commission in a prior session. There will be no separate discussion unless a Commissioner requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. The items on the April 12th consent agenda include Commission meeting minutes for February 22nd, March 1st, March 8th, March 15th, and March 29th. Also, Resolution 2023-128 is approved invoice payments for Clay County from the period of March 29th to April 6th for 299 invoices in the total amount of $434,942.25, and Resolution 2023-139 approving the sale of the parcel by Clay County Land Trustee to Flatland Expeditions by the Planning and Zoning Department.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Excuse me.
Yes, move to approve all items on tonight's consent agenda.
Motion's been made to approve this evening's consent agenda. Discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner,
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Withington,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
On this evening's regular agenda is 2023-130. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-130 is consideration of renewing a conditional use permit for the Tobacco Farm, Barn Farm. Director Jones is here to provide information.
Please proceed.
Kip Jones, Planning and Zoning Manager. So this is a renewal for a conditional use permit for the Tobacco Barn Farm. It is a wedding and event venue north of 33, or on 33 Highway north of Kearney. So I've got the property pulled up on the screen. It's outlined in yellow. It's approximately 40 acres. The original conditional use permit was approved in 2016 for a time period of 10 years. Now, obviously, that 10-year period is not up, but the applicant wanted to get ahead of the game and get the extension approved. The property is currently zoned agricultural, and the 2011 Land Development Code indicates that for ag zone land for recreation and entertainment, indoor and outdoor, a conditional use permit is required. Staff believes there are no substantial changes from the previous approved conditional use permit. Here's the surrounding area. That's the subject property. You can see I-35 to the east, Holt city limits in the gray to the north and east. And this area is just a mix of ag zone land in kind of the light green and R1 zone land, which are lots anywhere from 3 to 10 acres. So with any conditional use permit, we look at the comprehensive plan and the land development code. There are 6 criteria in the Land Development Code, which the review body should review. Those were included in the transmittal that was sent to the County Commission. Both staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission felt those have been addressed. Staff has received no opposition leading up to or during the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We met the public notice requirements, which included posting a sign on site, sending certified letters to adjacent property owners, and posting this case in the newspaper. We sent, I believe it was a total of 19 letters for this case. And then as part of the original conditional use permit, we reached out to outside agencies, which included MoDOT, MDNR for the septic system, the fire district, and the water district, and we've received no issues reported from any of those outside agencies. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval with 8 conditions. The applicant has agreed with those conditions. A couple highlights on those conditions is renewing the conditional use permit for 10 years, maintaining the screening to block the parking areas, and with any conditional use permit, we have a standard criteria or condition that states it could be revoked at any time based on validated public complaints to the LDC. Now, I want to mention that we have not had any complaints on this since 2016, and wanted to share a few pictures that the applicant provided for the barn itself because it was quite the renovation. And I would be happy to answer any questions the commission has, and the applicant is present as well.
Are there any questions of Mr. Jones? Seeing none. If the applicant would like to make comment, they are certainly free to do so. It is not necessary, but if you would like to add anything, you're certainly welcome to do so. Very well. With that, is there a motion related to 2023-130?
Yes, move to approve 2023-130.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2023-130. Further discussion?
And that's marked approved?
With mark for box approval. Yep.
Oh, thank you very much. Further discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner, Commissioner Carpenter,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Withington,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes, and thank you for the curtains, Kip.
Very nice effect. That brings us to the next 3 items, which are bundled together. That would be 2023-131, 132, and 133. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-131, 2023-132, and Resolution 2023-133 are companion resolutions for the rezoning preliminary plat and final plat for Clay's Timber subdivision. And Director Jones is here to provide information to the Commission.
Please proceed.
Kip Jones, Planning Director. So this is a rezoning preliminary and final for Clay's Timber. So the overall property is outlined in yellow. This is partially unplatted land that you can see on the left side that's zoned agricultural, and then the right side that's in the orange is part of a platted subdivision. It's approximately 52 acres. It's zoned ag and R1A, and it has access off of 92 highway. The proposal is to create 5 lots. So I probably should step back a little bit here. So currently there's 3 houses on the 52 acres. There were 2 houses that were built before we required building permits. So we have 2 houses on one property, and then we have a separate house on its own property. So the proposal is to go from basically 2 lots with 3 houses to 5 lots with the possibility of 5 houses. So here you can see the proposed lots shaded in the different colors. All the 4 lots in front would be zoned to R1, which is our current standard for lots that are between 10 but less than 20 acres. And then the back lot that's in the orange would be zoned agricultural. It does not have any road frontage, but the Land Development Code allows it to exist that way as long as it has a 60-foot wide access easement that I'll show you here in a minute. The 4 10-ish acre lots are required to have the agricultural land preservation. The ag zone lot is not. So there you can see the ALP areas that were chosen by the applicant. There are the 2 access easements. So they chose to have 2 access easements to the 20 acres and back, and MoDOT has approved those 2 accesses to serve as shared accesses for the lots in front as well. So here's the surrounding area. That's the subject parcel that we're talking about today. That's Kearney city limits to the east. So with any case that's within 1.5 miles of city limits, we reach out to that city for any comments. Kearney commented that this was outside their annexation area and that they had no additional comments to provide. There is a highway to the south and west and 92 highway that serves as the access. Again, we're going to talk about, with all our rezoning cases, we talk about those 5 rezoning criteria, which were included in the transmittal sent to the County Commission. Both staff and Planning and Zoning Commission felt those have been addressed. With this case, we received no opposition leading up to or during the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and we met those public notice requirements again. We received no objections from outside agencies, and the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval with 4 conditions, and the applicant has agreed to those conditions. A couple of those conditions are those shared driveway agreements. We will make sure that those get recorded with the plat to address things as maintenance and access for those lots. The applicant is present, and I am happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
Are there any questions of Mr. Jones? Commissioner Lawson, did you wish to be recognized? Oh, okay. Let me go back to this then. Are there any commissioners who would like to ask any questions of Mr. Jones? Seeing none. If the applicant would like to make any comment, they are certainly free to do so at this time. I have no comment. Very well. Is there a motion on 2023-131, 132, and 133 with the appropriate box checked? I'm sorry.
Yes, I move to check all boxes for approval and approve 2023-131, 132, and 133.
Motion's been made to approval of 2023, 131, 132, 133 with the boxes marked approved. Further discussion? Seeing none, go ahead and ask close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
That brings us to 2 more bundled items. That would be 2023-134 and 135. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-134 and 135 are companion resolutions for the rezoning and final plat for Barnell Estates subdivision, and Director Jones is here to provide information to the Commission.
Please proceed.
Kip Jones, Planning Director. So this is a little bit of a unique case. I've got it pulled up on the screen. It deals with 3 properties that each already have a single-family home. So we're not talking any additional lots or any additional homes. This case came about, if you see the blue lot on the north side, one of the properties was surveyed and they realized that there was a building on the property line. So we are basically adjusting the property lines to where each of the 3 owners thought they were, basically. So we're shifting the property lines to the south for these 3 lots. Since it was a platted subdivision, it had to be replatted to do that. And we would rezone them to our current zoning standard to meet the current land development code. So here you can see the 3 lots. You can see that little jut out on the blue lot. That's kind of how we're moving the property line to make sure that that building meets the setback requirements. All 3 property owners have agreed to this and are the applicants on this property line adjustment. And as I stated earlier, we're not talking any additional lots or any additional building. Here's the surrounding area. That's the subject property we're dealing with. That is the private garden subdivision and the Prairie Field subdivision to the south and east, and Kansas City city limits to the south and west. We sent a case review to the city of Kansas City and did not receive any comments from the city. This, since we're rezoning, has those same 5 rezoning criteria. Staff and Planning and Zoning Commission felt those have been addressed. We received no opposition for this case, and we met the public notice requirements. And again, this is just a lot line adjustment with no new lots being created, and the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval, which is just some changes to the plat, which one of those changes is just the applicants have agreed to change the name. It's not going to be Varnell Estates, it's just going to be a replat of those lots. So I would be happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have, and the applicant is present as well.
Are there any questions of Mr. Jones on these two items? Seeing none, if the applicants would care to comment at this time, they're certainly welcome to do so.
I do not, thank you.
Very well. With that, is there a motion related to 2023-134 and 135?
Yes, move to approve 2023-134 and 2023-135 with all boxes marked approve.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023-134 and 2023-135 with the boxes marked approved. Further discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Resolution 2023-136 and Resolution 2023-137 are companion resolutions for the rezoning and final plat for lots 8 and 9 of the Sunset Acres subdivision. And Director Jones will provide information to the commission.
Please proceed.
Kip Jones, Planning Director. So on this case, so this is Sunset Acres. It exists as 2 lots, was platted in 1975, zoned R1, and has access from 188th Street. The proposal is to just take those 2 lots, combine them into 1 lot. The property owner just wants to build 1 single-family home, doesn't need the 2 separate lots. Again, since this was platted, the way to combine those lots is to replat it. It would include an agricultural land preservation, which is shown in the green. The back area, there is a blue line stream that runs through the property and some floodplain, so that's a good area to protect that the property owner picked. Again, no additional lots. Does have a gas line easement that runs across the property that's shown in red. Obviously, that becomes basically a no-build zone. The property owner is aware of that. Here's the surrounding area. There's the subject property. This is kind of the northeast corner of the county, not highly developed. A lot of ag zoning in the light green, just a few residential zone lots in this area. Again, we have those same 5 rezoning criteria that staff and the Planning Zoning Commission felt had been addressed. This is in the rural low-density tier, which allows for a 5+ acre lot, which the applicant has met. We received no opposition, met those public notice requirements, and received no objections from those outside agencies. And the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval with 1 condition that the applicant agreed with. I would be happy to answer any questions the commission has, but I don't think our applicant is present, unless he snuck in on me.
Are there any questions of Mr. Jones on these 2 issues? Seeing none, if the applicant is present, they are certainly welcome to address the commission at this time. I see no one stepping forward. Therefore, is there a motion related to 2023-136 and 137?
Move to approve 2023-136 and 2023-137 with all boxes checked approved.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2023-136, 2023-137 with the boxes marked approved. Further discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
That brings us to our next item on our regular agenda this evening. That is 2023-138. Administrator.
Resolution 2023-138 is consideration of a 5-year contract between Motorola Solutions and Clay County Sheriff's Office for WatchGuard body-worn and mobile cameras and services. This particular topic was presented to the commission by staff over the last 2 meetings, and we are here to answer any questions that you may have about this project.
Are there any questions of staff on 2023-138? Very well. That being the case, is there a motion related to 2023-138? Commissioner Wagner?
Thank you. Move to approve 2023-138.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023-138. Further discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner. Aye. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
That brings us to 2023-126. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-126 is consideration of a term and supply contract with Van Wall Equipment, Heritage Tractor, and Murphy Tractor and Equipment for John Deere equipment parts and services. This is brought by our Facilities Department, and Director Driscoll is here and will provide information.
Please proceed.
Good evening, Mike Driscoll, Parks Director. This resolution asks for the approval of bid 02-23 and a term and supply contract for John Deere equipment, parts, and services. And we have received 3 notifications back that meet specifications, and we would like to use these 3 vendors in this, to be approved for this contract. Van Wall is the area distributor of John Deere golf equipment. They also do commercial mowers and compact tractors. They are not a heavy equipment or construction equipment, but basically we get all of our John Deere golf equipment there. Heritage Tractor, we use a lot. Parks and airport and highway and facilities all have John Deere products that we use: tractors, mowers, gators, and we have some light construction equipment, and we would like to use them for that. Murphy Tractor specializes mostly in heavy equipment and construction equipment. All 3 of these vendors are local, and we've used them quite a bit in the past. And we'd just like for the approval of this bid for this term and supply contract.
Are there any questions on this issue? Commissioner Wagner?
Thank you. Just going through the paperwork, just wanting to, if you would, just talk a little bit about pricing, that pricing against what we have budgeted for that effort.
The John Deere parts and services generally is a set price with John Deere Company. They do allow their dealers to set discounts and stuff on local markets. And all 3 of these have either expressed a discount or a set service price that we could use. And basically it allows us to access any parts or service that we need. And with all the equipment that we have, at some times we will, spend pretty big amounts. So it uses up, our regular allotment pretty quick. We hit that last year. So with this in place, we could use the discounts and the service to use it whenever we need to.
Gotcha. So when it says percentage off standard pricing for parts, and I know in one of them it was only 3%, in this other one that I'm looking at it was 0. So I guess the bottom line is there's no surprise in the pricing. We haven't had the inflationary shock where everything goes up 100%.
That's right.
Everything's in line.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none. Is there a motion related to 2023-126?
Move to approve 2023-126.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023-126. Further discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
That brings us to the final item under our regular agenda, 2023-140. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-140 is to approve an agreement and a capital project encumbrance request for an ARPA stormwater infrastructure project for Mothershed Creek at Old BB. And Highway Administrator Terry Griffin is here to provide information to the Commission about this project.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Terry Griffin, Highway Administrator. This is a request to approve a contract to replace the stormwater structure over Mothershed Creek using ARPA stormwater infrastructure funds. This is one of the projects that was authorized by the Commission last year, and the project will The structure is located in the northeast part of the county on Old BB Road near 188th Street. The structure itself is over 70 years old, has a load posting of 10 tons, and the most recent MoDOT inspection noted a variety of structural deficiencies. Uncontrolled stormwater at this location has caused sloughing and eroding of the stream banks, and stormwater is cutting a narrow side channel on one side of the streamway, increasing the width of the stream and creating additional stress on the structure. The age of the structure, combined with the force of repeated storm events, and especially those extreme storm events that we sometimes experience, has damaged the structure wing walls to the point that they have broken away from the main structure and are now leaning towards the creek. On-call contractor Decker Construction will replace the existing structure using plans and specifications developed by our on-call engineering consultant, Burns & McDonnell. The new structure will be built using MoDOT standard specifications for highway construction and will be similar to the structures seen here. The new structure will use standard steel girders and when finished will be 72 feet long. The project includes demolition and removal of the existing structure, on-site slope corrections, construction, and final finishing of the site. Because the project does cost over $75,000, Decker Construction will comply with prevailing wage order and with County Ordinance 2022 Ordinance 43. Construction will begin when design is complete, when we have appropriate permits, and when construction steel has been delivered, probably about 4 to 5 months after the contract is approved. Actual construction is expected to be completed in 10 to 12 weeks, weather permitting. I'll be glad to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
Are there any questions? Commissioner, let me get back.
I ask questions sometimes just to see how hard it is for you to get back and work for you. But in all seriousness,
I'm glad to provide some level of entertainment.
I appreciate it. In all seriousness, though, you mentioned that the present bridge has been around for 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes me wonder what the expected life of the new bridge would be.
Probably anywhere from 50 to 70 years.
Okay, we're right on track then. All right, thank you very much.
You will note your microphone is on, of course.
Yes, it is now.
All right. Any further questions? Seeing none, is there a motion on 2023-140?
Move to approve 2023-140.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023-140. Further discussion? Seeing none, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner.
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Withington.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
That completes our regular agenda. Next are discussion items. The first discussion item that we have is on the topic of feral dogs, and this is, I believe, Commissioner Withington's issue. So if you'd like to start the conversation, please go right ahead.
Yes, so on the campaign trail, I met Dawn. She has been working on this, and I've invited her to come and talk to the commission. This is a problem that's been going on outside in city limits around Smithville, right? All in Clay. Okay, in rural unincorporated Clay County, and I just invited her to come and speak to the commission tonight.
Very well. If you would like to come forward and give us your discussion item a little bit, we'd be happy to hear it.
I appreciate it. My name is Dawn Adams. I'm a Clay County resident. I moved from Liberty, Missouri.
Do you need me to start over? Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Dawn Adams. I recently moved from Liberty, Missouri to rural Clay County outside of Smithville. Upon moving, I noticed immediately, let me back up. I'm super involved in rescue, just to give you my background. I work full-time, but I volunteer in rescue. I volunteer at shelters, I foster, I scan, I trap dogs. I do a variety of different things to reunite dogs, lost dogs with owners. Upon moving to the rural area in Smithville, I noticed immediately that we have a big problem in the county, and I wanted to surface that problem to this group. Currently, we do not have any animal welfare, I can't speak, sorry, which is causing a lot of downstream problems. Right now, if you find a dog in Clay County, it's outside of city limits, there's nowhere for it to go. It could be Fido, a family pet. Fido gets left out, the person who finds him has nowhere to take him. Any of the municipal pounds won't take him, shelters won't take him. So now he becomes a feral dog and has to fend for himself, which is really sad. And owners who desperately are looking for their dogs have no means to find their dogs because there's nowhere for them to end up. That's just one problem. So it's causing a problem within the community. Additionally, it's causing a lot of additional stress on the rescues and the municipal pounds that we have in place. It's not uncommon for people to lie when they're desperate and go to their local pound, whether it be Smithville, Excelsior, Gladstone, and say, oh, I found this dog over here, when really they didn't. That creates a whole flurry of other problems. It's creating additional stress on the already full and overpopulated shelters, which are having to turn to kill shelters at that point because of their numbers are increasing. And it also creates a problem. The owner really doesn't know where to look at that point because the animal's been relocated as well, and they look in the wrong area. So there's a lot of things there. Additionally, the third problem that we're seeing in increases is dumping. So the word's gotten around that if you go to rural Clay County, you just take your dog that you can't turn over to KCPP because they're full, or any other rescue or shelter, and you just go dump it in the rural area, which again brings us back to the community. So I get a lot of phone calls from farmers who are like, I'm gonna shoot this dog if you don't come get it right now. My house is turning into a shelter. I'm a resident, I'm a citizen. So I wanted to surface this problem and ask if we could have further conversations about how can we fix it, and I'd love to be a part of that fix. I work closely with a lot of the, again, the animal control officers in Clay County, and I feel like they're our biggest stakeholders. They're the ones out here who are feeling that pain. And also the rescues, such as Dogs by Devon is in Clay County. We've got Goldie's got Naws in Clay County. We've got quite a few. Melissa's Menagerie just moved to rural Clay County as well. So a lot of rescue folks who really want to step up to the plate and help and maybe see if we can't get some funding, whether it be outside sources, grants, things like that. And what can we do to make animal welfare a priority in Clay County? That was a lot, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. We appreciate you coming forward and giving us your views on this. So further discussion, Commissioner Withington?
No, the only thing that I had talked to some of you guys before taking the commission was possibly starting an ad hoc committee with people like Don who could study the issue, look for grants, look at things, and then report back to us their findings and some financial tools that we could, as a county could look at. So maybe that's something we can discuss as a commission, is how we can empower people like Don to actually look at this and come up with some solutions for us to address this problem.
Okay. Commissioner Carpenter.
Thank you. And this is for Commissioner Withington or you, Don. Do y'all have any idea of how other counties deal with this issue in terms of their unincorporated, when there's not animal control within the city limits? I like to look at successful models that are already working. Yep. So
often they'll outsource either to a local vet or another rescue. For example, Platte County did have an arrangement for a long time with Dr. Jackson. He recently retired, so they're kind of in the same boat. It would be actually, in my mind, it would be really cool if Clay and Platte combined and created a regional shelter. That would be the right answer. There's a lot of other outsourcing. Wayside Waves is a great opportunity. Jackson County outsources to Wayside Waves. The problem you run into with a vet is the same thing. Like Dr. Jackson was a wonderful thing, right? And then he retired. At one point we had Long Veterinary up here in Kearney as well that we had an arrangement with, and I believe the Corps of Engineers still does for animals found on Corps property, but anything outside of that, there's nowhere for them to go.
Gotcha, yeah. So, and when you say that Jackson County, for example, outsources to Wayside Waves, like what do you mean by that? They get funding to Wayside Waves to help deal with the issue?
Yeah, they pay. So for example, Riverside's a great example. I don't think Riverside's Platte. I think it's Platte. Riverside doesn't have an animal control officer. Well, they kind of do, a pseudo, but they don't have a pound. So they will impound an animal and they'll keep it 24 hours and they'll transport it long-term for Wayside, and Wayside handles it from there. So they do pay a fee for that. I don't know what that fee is, but it works well for them. They don't get stuck holding the dog. Another thing I forgot to mention too was citations. So because we don't have that in place and we don't have a way to cite people for cruelty and neglect, and we're seeing a really big increase on the county side on cruelty and neglect because of that too, especially with that dumping situation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
So a couple questions. First of all, do all the cities in the county have animal control?
A variety, a lot of it's ran municipally. If they're small, like Pleasant Valley has a dedicated police officer who runs animal control and is animal control. Platte County has Deputy Doherty who does it on the side. I'm from Smithville. Smithville has a municipal pound as well. So we have a water department employee. We don't actually, but we're getting ready to have an animal control officer for that exact reason. We have a problem in Smithville city limits where we've got feral cats, feral dogs, feral everything running around because of the lack of enforcing those ordinances that are in place, leash laws and things like that.
So outside any of the city limits, there's no animal control?
Outside of city limits, no. For example, I live on 144th Street off of 169. If I find an animal on my property, there's nowhere for it to go. If I walk up 3 houses, it can go to Smithville.
And you mentioned about citations for animal cruelty, that kind of thing. Is our sheriff's department able to cite for that?
They can, they're capable of doing it. We have several cases right now that I'm aware of that I've been trying to push, and it's very difficult because it's not a priority for them. It's, a +1 to their job.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. So when I served in my second term in Kansas City, we put on our GO bond ballot what eventually became the Casey Pet Project and the shelter there. The city then contracted with them to do both operation of the shelter as well as, subsequent to my service, the animal control function. So I guess my question is somewhat along the lines of Commissioner Carpenter's, related to what stops anyone, that being the county, from contracting with Casey Pet Project or anyone else for that matter to do that level of sheltering? Or has that been broached and they've just said, no, we're not going to do that?
I don't know that KCPP would intake due to their current situation. I don't know that it's been approached either, to be honest. There's a distance situation there. Obviously, you're aware that Raytown Road, that'd be quite a ways to go. I'm not saying they might not do it, but right now they're over the limit and consistently having to euthanize every day because they've got too many. They took in, I think I read they took in 58 dogs just yesterday alone.
Sure.
They've got more coming in than going out, unfortunately.
Well,
But that's not to say that there's not possibilities in Clay County. A good example is, if you're familiar with Melissa's Second Chance, she actually just moved to Clay County and bought a large amount of property. I have not even had the conversation with her, but it might be something she might be able to do. She's got experience in boarding and she's got experience in rescue and things like that. There's a possibility that there's someone out there. There's also a possibility that there's funds out there to stand up something net new. Excelsior Springs stood up a very nice facility, and so did Liberty. Liberty's is beautiful, and it would be really awesome if we could try to do something like that our own, and maybe in the interim even find an opportunity to outsource temporarily.
Well, I'll just say, and to our colleague's question, I'm agnostic as far as how we may want to go forward. I just know that when we did that facility at Swope Park for Casey Pet Project, that was a $24 million project. And so I have a tendency to begin to add up dollar signs, right? So there's the capital cost of things and then there's the operational cost of things, both of which have to be dealt with. And as you point out, in a county that doesn't do that, and we get very antsy about, or at least when I look at the administrator, she gets a little antsy about when we start talking about, do we add services that we have not performed before, and is there a reason to do so? So my natural tendency is to start looking at, well, if you're 3 houses down from Smithville, is there a reason why a contract couldn't be done with Smithville or Liberty or Gladstone or whomever? And it's not to suggest any of those are the right ways to go, but I guess I do want to at least raise a little bit of caution that as you ask for something that is indeed worthwhile, my experience tells me that those dollars can add up very quickly. We had a very robust conversation when we first started about budgets, and so I want to be cognizant that as we look at solutions, that we understand, not only the service that's being asked for, but what does that mean for us to provide it. Which is not to say it's good, bad, or otherwise, because I understand, but my experience in Kansas City tells me there's a lot of discussion on how to fund it depending on what route you want to go to do it. So, but I do appreciate you bringing the issue up for sure. Thank you.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yeah, boy, this is a problem, and I know we live in the rural area. Years back when we had cattle and the cows would calf, you had to almost sit in the pasture with a shotgun to try to keep dogs or coyote, whatever, away from the newborn calves. So, and it is a problem. People move out and they think, oh, I have to have a dog. And then they let the dog run wild, and it's on everybody's property, endangering their livestock or their kids. You know, it is definitely a problem. And I find it, and I understand the budget, and I'm one of the people that screams the loudest if anybody wants to spend a dime. So, but I do think this is something, as Commissioner Withington said, we need to looking at this, form a committee, whatever we need to do, and start seeing what options we have, maybe like you talked about, or someone did, about sharing with Platte County or another county, because they probably have a similar situation. So Ray County would be a good one. So anyway, that's my thought on it, if we could get something going and try to address the problem, because if you live in the county, it is a problem, and we need to take care of the people out there too. So thank you for doing what you do.
I appreciate that.
Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you. Don, I want to thank you for coming up and bringing this issue to light, because we've actually recently helped my mother-in-law adopt a dog, so we've been at the shelters. And even the past couple of weeks, we've seen the turnover just because of all the dogs that have been coming in. And at the KC Pet Projects, it's been, like, they're doubled up in cages. It's insane. So I would love to think that we have some kind of resource here in the county that we can explore and come up with a solution to this, because it's a shame that, and people are having, they fall in bad luck, and then they have to let their dogs out, and then they go, and then they end up in these strange places, and they do get euthanized. And if we can get some resources, and I do like the idea of probably coming up with some solutions of talking with KC Pet Project, Humane Society, We Said Waves, and seeing what we can come up with. But I appreciate you bringing this up, because we don't always talk about the puppies and the dogs and the critters that are loose in our county, but I think it's a real problem right now. So.
I appreciate that. It's been very difficult for me coming from Kansas City, because I lived in Liberty School Districts, but on the Kansas City side. And as a volunteer trapper and scanner, I never thought twice when I would see posts on the Facebook page. I moderate several of those lost and found pages. Oh, the dog's on 152. It's running down 152. I'll go grab it. No big deal, because it always had somewhere to go. And it breaks my heart living in the country. Because now that dog, and I'll use Smithville for an example, the city limits are small. They're not big, where they will intake from. And so when I have to think twice, because if I go scan it and there's no chip, I'm now stuck with it. And I have dog in my house right now that I've had for 3 months, and I have multiples in my garage all the time. So it just has really put a burden on me, because these dogs don't deserve that. And a lot of them, the last few I've scanned to have been brought over from Independence and dropped, or brought over from where and dumped, because people have caught on to the fact that, you can just go to Clay County and dump your dog because nobody cares. Nobody's going to do anything. So it breaks my heart. And it breaks my heart that when people get unassociated with their animal, maybe even at Smithville Lake, we're a lake community, right? They may never find their dog again, because there's no one going to look for it. There's nowhere to hold it, and there's nowhere for it to go.
I did have a question also, and I've always lived in incorporated Clay County, so in the municipalities that I've lived in, there's always been an animal control department, so to speak. So if we were to contract with someone to shelter these animals, what is the procedure? Do they send someone out? If somebody says there's this stray dog, we need to come out and get him taken care of, who goes? Is it the shelter that sends somebody? If we're contracting with a municipality, they would send their animal control. Would the sheriff need to go collect the animals? I'm kind of curious as to how that works, because it would make no sense, for instance, if there were a dog outside of, say, Smithville city limits, to call Liberty. It's just the distance there's no logic, so we would almost have to have a relationship with each one of the municipalities that bordered unincorporated Clay County. How do those, I have no idea how those work, and you may not know, and it might not be a particularly fair question, but I'm just kind of curious as to how that goes forward.
Sure, I can answer that actually.
Oh, good.
I volunteer at most of them, so I know that I'm very familiar with their workflows and their processes. So for example, if you find a dog in Smithville, for example, we do not have an animal control officer today at all. We have an animal, again, water department employee who manages the animals during her business hours. There's no one outside of those business hours to care for them. So if an intake occurs, the police department gets dispatched out, and the police officers have to catch the dog and be expected to know how to deal with a possible aggressive, scared dog, which is scary in itself, right? How to capture it, and then they have to impound it. They actually have to bring it to the pound themselves, check it in, give it food and water, and scan it for a chip themselves. So I fill in that gap a lot of times where I'll offer, hey, let me come up and help if you're having trouble with it or whatever. Then in the morning, it's cared for by that person. So that's an example of how that works. That dog stays there and goes on a stray hold and then gets adopted out if the owner doesn't come forward. They do all talk, they all work together, they market really well together. Gladstone has 3 animal control officers, but it's still a municipal ran pound. So the animal control officers are doing animal services, the animal control piece. So they will actually be dispatched out by the police department to go retrieve a dog at North Oak and 72nd Terrace. So they will actually go impound that dog, catch that dog, impound that dog, bring it in. Parkville, I'll use them as an example because it's an odd situation, but a good one. Parkville stood up, and it's not Clay County, it's Platte. Parkville stood up Friends of Parkville Animal Shelter. They have a really unique, awesome situation going there where they stood up a 501c3, which I have a 501c3 in Smithville too, to do the same thing, to benefit Parkville Shelter. It went over so well. The shelter made a decision. They actually used to outsource to a vet as well for care in Parkville, and that vet retired. So then they had a conversation, how do we partner? How do we do this together? Let's offset the money. So what they've done is they've split up, the pound is ran by volunteers, by Friends of Parkville, and then the animal control piece is managed by the police department, and they work together. It could be 10 o'clock at night and they'll call them and say, hey, I need help. This dog's not gonna let me catch it, it's scared, come help. And their volunteers come help, and they're very active, very good as well. So you get all those different flavors, but to answer your question, if it's a municipal ran, if there's an animal control officer, the animal control officer goes. But if it's an animal control officer that is a police department, often they don't have the skill set to capture those dogs. That's where I come into play. I get called by Clay Como, I get called by all of them, like, we need help because we don't know how to get this dog. It's avoiding us, it's been here. I just got one at Ford plant. It's been inside the Ford plant for 2 months and nobody can touch it inside the Ford plant. So things like that, because the longer that the animal is in a stressful environment, the worse off they get. They deteriorate really fast, they become feral. And at that point, they're not adoptable either. So you have to really work to catch them and get them in an adoptable state.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Withington, if you'd like to round off our discussion then?
Yeah, no, Don, thank you for coming and speaking on this. And yeah, no, I close.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, if, Commissioner, if you want to get a couple of other commissioners together and kind of look into this and maybe make recommendations at some future point to the commission, that might be our best way forward, rather than construct a specific and formal group. Maybe ad hoc, as I think, well, the phrase that was used, might be the better route to go. That brings us to our second discussion item, Regional Resource Sharing Agreement. That would be the administrator.
Yes, so Mid-America Regional Council, MARC, the regional planning organization in the Kansas City metropolitan area, has approached entities within the region in consideration of participating in a regional resource sharing agreement. So I'm sure you're very familiar, which is very common with mutual aid agreements, but particularly in first responders, police departments, fire departments, even ambulance medical services. And so MARC has worked with both the regional Homeland Security and also emergency manager directors within the region to come up with this resource agreement. And so should a need happen, there are also other services that we could tap into that are not covered in mutual aid agreements. For example, it could be, depending on the situation, that an entity would need employees that can drive large pieces of equipment and run a backhoe. So that could involve our highway department or our parks department. They also may need help with phone intake people or public information officers. And so there are a lot of different services that we as agencies and entities have at our disposal that if there is another agency in the region that is experiencing some kind of situation where a mutual aid, where we could assist them to provide those needs to their residents, this mutual aid agreement is beyond more than the first responders. The agreement is pretty standard in the aspect that it talks about how someone, an entity, would make a request to all of those agencies that are participating. Certainly if we participate, we're not obligated to do it, and no one expects an entity to basically not be able to take care of their own residents or their own community. But if there is a need, let's say Leavenworth County in Kansas, that they needed some resources and we could spare individuals from our highway department along with our equipment, we could go and help them and assist the need. The agreement also talks about what happens when an employee from our organization, it goes and is part of it in, let's say, Leavenworth County, it's crossing the state line. So having an agreement accomplishes setting up those parameters and those expectations. So they would be our employees, so they're covered under Missouri workers' comp. They would be covered under our payroll. This does not talk about being reimbursed by any agency. That is left up to the agency requesting whether they would reimburse the entities that are helping them. Now, certainly we know that if there's a natural disaster that is declared, then there is all sorts of different procedures that are put in place and using NIMS and all sorts of different things, and where there might be federal funding for reimbursement. So basically what this agreement does is allow, if the county does participate, it means we could be called upon to help other agencies within the metropolitan area. And also, should the county have a need, and it's not necessarily a declared national disaster, but something may happen that the county needs some assistance, we could also reach out to those participating agencies and get their resources, whether it's their staff or their large equipment, a public information officer, any of those that are not really what we would consider first responders. This does not replace those mutual aid agreements. This is just in addition to that. The cities and agencies in Clay County, so we know that North Kansas City has already participated in this. It's my understanding staff at Liberty is getting ready to prepare something to take to their city council with a recommendation, and also Excelsior Springs. So those are some of the Clay County jurisdictions that I know that are also looking to participate in this program. Staff would recommend that we participate in the program. Again, it is really a mutual aid. We do it all the time when it comes to first responders. This is just broadening that so that we could use, and we've done this before, when flooding happened in Excelsior Springs. We've set equipment down there and staffing to help them. And so it's not uncommon. What this does do is basically outline what that process is, and that when there is a need, we've already taken care of the approval in the administrative process because this agreement exists. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about this.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yeah, thank you. A statement first. I think that in today's world, well, in fact, a good example would be a week or so ago when there was an issue in Gladstone. Our county people were there to assist. I think it was, a guy had barricaded himself in the house, and they sent assistance. I know that they do that from time to time all over already. I have concerns with this because I feel that right now our county deputies are pretty well stretched. I think that our road people, I've heard their people say, boy, we need more help, we need additional, and I would have felt better had this come from the sheriff himself, and I see him here, so I would like him to kind of address this, because a good portion of this, when you talk about sharing, it's usually law enforcement has a big hand in it. So I'd like your take on this, Sheriff, how you feel about it.
Good afternoon, Commission. Will Aiken, Sheriff of Clay County. I have to start off by saying I was pretty surprised by seeing this again. And I could spend the next half hour to hour giving you historical context about where this came from and how it started, because I was actually the chairperson of the Metropolitan Emergency Managers Committee when we were really having conversations about this. So in Clay County, we will always help all partners. I mean, we've proven that with Mosby, we've proven that with Smithville, we've proven that with every other city, to include Gladstone, Excelsior Springs. The issue of why we're still talking about this and how long we've been talking about this is because we already help each other out, right? But the federal standard through FEMA, the thing that always gets in the way is the fact that you never self-deploy, right? And so that self-deploy piece will always ruin everything when it comes to quote-unquote mutual aid. Now, for us, for myself being the former emergency manager of Clay County, so I'm giving you historical context, but I would have to call Melissa Evans, our current emergency manager, to give us updated information. But with that is, if we're experiencing inclement weather, for example, and we know tornadoes are coming through, other agencies outside of Clay County have already said, we're not likely to help because we don't know how we're going to be impacted. Now, when the Smithville tornado happened, everyone was telling me, Will, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you call me? And I was like, well, I was kind of busy. I was kind of busy with the 600 houses that were damaged and one completely taken off of the foundation. I didn't have time to think about you calling me. So as the chairperson of MEMC, is what we call it, the Metropolitan Emergency Managers Committee, we kind of said to everyone, look, if an agency or an organization is in distress, don't wait for them to call you, okay? Reach out to them. And so that was a standard that we started from that point on, which turned into trying to develop a Type 4 team. Now, a Type 4 team would be something that would help specifically the KC metro area out. So when an inclement weather came in, we could actually start planning and pre-deploying assets in order to help where we think it's going to impact. Now, with our partners like the National Weather Service and all the other emergency managers in the cities, we can do that if we work together. Now, that's fallen completely flat on its face because people don't want to commit to it. So my concern is we're doing this, which, full disclosure, I think it's a great idea. It's a great idea, but no one wants to fully commit to it. And the reason why I'm really surprised is because all the emergency managers were involved in this, all the fire chiefs were involved in this, the police chiefs were involved in this, as well as the sheriff's offices, and it never took off when we first started talking about it back in 2015, 2014. So we're going on 10 years now talking about this. My even bigger concern is Clay County is not a part of the Core 4. Okay, the Core 4 is Johnson County, Kansas, Wyandotte County, Kansas, Jackson County, Missouri, and Kansas City, Missouri. And Commissioner Wagner is probably well aware of the Core 4. And so what I mean by my concern about we're not a part of the Core 4 is when decisions are being made, it's essentially being made by those 4 entities. And then everyone else can just follow if you want to. I kind of have a problem with that. Because if we're going to have 90 square miles of Kansas City inside Clay County and that decision's already being made by entities outside of Clay County, come on, we should be involved in this. So with all that being said, the major issue is agencies, and I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but the conversations that I've been involved with and in is, I don't want to tell you what I have, because then I'm committing myself to giving you resources that through the planning phase, I have to hold back because I don't know how it's going to impact me. Well, all right. Well, if Kansas City, Missouri is doing this, which I'm actually kind of interested, is Kansas City, Missouri doing this? Because they were kind of the ones that were saying, we're not going to do this. All right. But that was way back when. All right. Now I'm kind of interested to see where they're at now. And if they are, then okay, maybe there's some more to be said. But I have actually been removed from the MEMC and RHSCC and all the other acronyms that I was involved with for years and years and years. So I only have historical context. But I was actually surprised to see that this is still a topic of conversation almost 10 years later, and we still haven't gained any ground. So that alone right there kind of causes me some concern. How is it that it circumvented all the police chiefs, fire chiefs, emergency managers, and ended up before you today? And so I'm not saying anybody's trying to, thwart any kind of discussion or anything like that, but I think the people who need to be involved are the ones that that aren't here, the police chiefs and the fire chiefs, emergency managers. The only ones that are here are myself and emergency manager Melissa Evans. So with that, I hope it helps. I would be happy to answer any other questions. I think it's a great idea if we can, it's a great concept if we can get everyone fully on board and committed to it. But that means I have to expose all of my equipment, all of my resources. And I have to say, just to finish this off, is Missouri has a great emergency management system, but we still can't even type law enforcement resources. That's a big deal. How are we going to type other resources and other assets if all we're doing is just saying, hey, this is how many tractors I have, this is how many cop cars I have. And like I said, I could talk for another hour about this, but I think you get my point. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. So
The administrator, you'd mentioned that there were some that municipalities that were considering it, I believe.
Correct.
But as far as we know, none of those have adopted.
North Kansas City has adopted it as part of this agreement. Liberty and Excelsior Springs, or their staff are both taking it forward to their elected bodies, but they have not done that yet.
Very well.
So, and I would like to say, you know, I agree with the sheriff, but again, this particular item is really setting, in my opinion, sets it aside from first responders. So it's not really committing from the sheriff's department. This is more about from our highway, our parks, our public information officers, other services that may be in need. And yes, we are not obligated by any means that if we think it puts the county at risk of not being able to meet the needs of our citizens, then we do not have to send anyone and do not have to participate.
I actually caught that when we were talking about highway department and stuff like that. Now, in full disclosure, we never included those entities. It was always the fire, police, emergency management. So if all these entities want to sign on and say, hey, this is how many resources we have, I think that's a great idea. But is this completely separate from first response? I mean, if that's the case, then hey, I mean, by all means, go ahead and let the world know what you have. But if we're also including law enforcement or public safety, if you will, then I would definitely be concerned about that.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. The thing to remember is this is coming out of the Mid-America Regional Council. They are the MPO, Master Planning Organization, for this entire area. They do stuff like this. The point is well taken about Core 4, and it's been suggested to me there needs to be a Core 5 and Clay County needs to be number 5, and I don't necessarily disagree with that either. But I do, even within those Core 4 conversations that I'm aware of, when I was serving with Kansas City, you know, there would be some conversations that are just as simple as, hey, I don't have a cherry picker to go be able to put up banners because I'm a small city. I don't have that kind of equipment, but Kansas City, you do. You know, is there an opportunity to utilize that sort of thing? All the way up to the notion of a bridge goes out, and a substantial one at that, and now you've got to bring all kinds of equipment to clear everything out, and that's beyond just the emergency management aspect of those things. So I do understand the nuance of this, and so I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily look at this as it's going to take away a lot of our resources, because there may be pieces of equipment that Clay County does not have. There may be some things that, man, it'd be sure great if Carl had access to X in order to do something. We don't have it, but maybe Johnson County does. And, you know, I usually don't speak well of Kansas, but I will in this case to say that maybe they have some things that maybe we do not. And so as I look at this, that's the part I see. Now, when you have an issue like a tornado, yeah, I don't know when that issue is going to end. I'm not necessarily going to deploy my officers into the field because I may need them here, and I completely understand that. But I do believe that there are issues and things that where this can be helpful to be able to utilize and cross-use, if that's a word, various pieces of equipment and other things, whether an emergency has prompted that or not. But to that end too, you know, it is kind of a, maybe not necessarily a new thing, but you know, anytime you want to use someone else's equipment, I mean, my sons don't like letting each other borrow things, so I get it, right? I understand that. So I don't know if there would be a value to having someone from Mark kind of explain, this is kind of where we see this being utilized and how it's utilized. I think I get it, but maybe I'm missing a few things. But as I did work probably 20 years ago with the emergency management folks during my agency days when it was time for weather radios, do they still do that, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Okay,
one of the
good.
best forms of getting your communication about inclement weather.
Get your weather radio, everybody that's watching. But my point in saying it is that there are things that your group does within that Mark umbrella. And I think there's a few things that this contemplates that may be a little bit different, but again, it's a little bit new. Maybe if there's a desire, maybe we can make a request for someone, whether it's David Warm or anyone else from Mark, to come and really fully explain what the intention is behind this. I think there's some value to that. And I'll leave it at that, and I always appreciate...
Yeah, you know, one thing I want to add is this concept is new, but the concept of mutual aid is not. And if you go back to when the Hyatt Bridge collapse, happened, I mean, from that, we created, we being the region, the heavy equipment operators group. And so when you're talking about bridge collapses, anything civil of nature, I mean, we already have mechanisms in place to help each other out. And, you know, for our area, we already help each other out. And I think we're getting better at it, but there's still that NIMS, as the administrator had mentioned, man, like I did it for years, and I think it works. But at the same time, if it's already there and we're not committing to anything anyway, like I am interested in what the intent is now. You know, why are we doing this now if we're already doing it? Are we just adding or wanting to put a name to it? Okay, but I just want to know more.
I think part of the reason for formalizing in the agreement, my understanding is with Mark, is because we do cross state lines, and there are differences between Missouri and Kansas. And so to some degree, it is about clarification on protection of employees. If there are employees and we're sending them to Kansas, what does that mean? And Kansas has some different statutes that their entities have to do differently to even participate in this particular program. So I think that was a little bit that came out of Mark, is when they started looking at the legalities of the issues, is if this agreement was written such that it could accommodate that, so that when those requests comes forward, the administrative piece of it is already done, right? And so then if a call comes up and says from somebody, hey, Clay County, do you have a cherry picker that we could borrow because we've got a dangerous tree and we don't have one, you know, then those things are in place. And if we have one and we can afford the time with the staff, you know, to send it over there and take care of it, we're happy to do that. Would we do that if we don't have this in place? Possibly. Right. Right.
That's a really good point, because you know, when you start talking about states helping states, you actually have to go through an EMAC process. But we are actually a part of the UASI, the Urban Area Security Initiative, and that includes Kansas and Missouri. And if somebody could correct me, I believe the states actually had to agree to that in order to apply for all the grants. So when all this was taking place, and I believe it was shortly after 9/11, when we became a UASI region, that was already taken care of. So if something has changed, then this addresses it, absolutely, because the last thing I want to do is send one of my deputies or an asset into Kansas and them get hurt, and now, you know, they're not going to cover it, or it becomes a headache. If this addresses it, that's great. I did notice that Melissa Evans is standing up back there. I don't know if she has anything to add to this, but I'd like to give her an opportunity if that's all right.
Hi. Melissa Evans, Clay County Emergency Management Director. I'm just going to add some current stuff to his historical data. I have spoke with Aaron Lynch and Jason White with Mark, and have worked with them since we talked to Diana, trying to figure out exactly where this would help or what the value of it would be for us. In reality, they are focusing on the VOADs, and they're focusing on your PIOs, they're focusing on volunteers, because they do not have, per se, the rights like the law enforcement and fire and EMS. The only problem is this really doesn't benefit them either. It's kind of, it could be good, it could be bad. So this is basically going to be what you feel is appropriate or not. There's no legal binding anything to this. There is a lot of verbiage in there that I find kind of questionable that I would suggest you read, reread, and see if you really understand and or in agreement with it. I know I have spoke at length with Kearney, with Gladstone, with Kansas City. We have liaison meetings. We went through this with them. We read it, we reread it. A lot of them, I know you had mentioned Excelsior and Liberty. They have not spoke with me on it, but I know the other ones have not signed and had no intention to sign. I've talked with Jim Conley at length. He is to the point to where he's also been a part of this discussion for a very long time. He's not any motivated to get this done. I would be more than happy to answer questions. Like I said, I am with Mark daily. We sit on the MEMC. So I have spoke with them on how to do this. They do check with me. They update me, and North Kansas City is the only one that has signed this.
Commissioner Johnson.
A couple questions. First, can someone explain to me a little better this Core 4 and why we're not at the table?
I think Commissioner Wagner might be able to answer that even better than I could.
I can give it a shot, although I didn't create it, so let me make that sure that's said. So those that make up the Core 4 are basically the 4 largest jurisdictions in the region. That's why you have
That's
Kansas
exactly what I was
City,
gonna say.
Wyandotte, Johnson, and Jackson counties. So
Based on population?
Basically, yeah, that would be correct.
It was a combination of population as well as assets.
Yeah.
That they were just the ones that had more, they had more to bring to the table back when it was created.
Yeah.
A lot's changed since then.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real magic to it other than that. You probably saw with the COVID announcements was probably really the last time, at least publicly, you saw those jurisdictions acting in a concerted manner. But there's really, the idea was, to the point, they're large enough where they have more assets than anyone else. Therefore, if there's a need to spread them around or deal with issues, they would come together to do so. But I would also say I wouldn't call it a formalized organization by any means. I mean, it is not a smaller equivalent of the Mid-America Regional Council. It is, in my mind, more of an informal association that, based on size of those governments, they talk more, work together more. I think that's...
Yeah, I mean, you know, I agree. I think it kind of stemmed from the emergency and resources, but I think they just kind of get together and talk about what they do. The last time I was involved with Core 4, they were doing sort of a student day down at Bartle Hall, and organized where those of us in the public sector would be there to demonstrate, being a police officer, being a firefighter. We had the accountants, but nobody wanted to stop at their table. And so but Core 4 organized that event, and then all of us that were not necessarily part of Core 4 participated in that event. So they do just different things.
It's kind of a coalition of the will.
So is
It's
it?
not really formal.
Right.
But they call themselves that, yeah.
Kind of. They got a name, so they got that much.
So is this Core 4 who put this resource sharing agreement together?
No.
No, this actually came through Mark, Mid-America Regional Council. It started with them. Now, whether Core 4 was at the table and had discussions with Mark when it started, that's possible, but it really, it's my understanding that it was Mark and then 8 members of Mark, along with Homeland Security and the emergency management directors.
But I would reiterate...
I don't know if they were all involved. That, it could have been just a few of them.
Yeah, but I would reiterate the point the sheriff made earlier, that even in my first term in Kansas City, there was a desire, and obviously continues to be a desire at the Mid-America Regional Council to have regional emergency plans in place. And I think what I gathered from the earlier comment is that there isn't any issue that has prompted this. This is more of we're going to get out ahead of this issue, and here's an agreement just in case. I think based on what I've heard, that's how I would characterize
That's my
this.
understanding.
Yeah.
Because all the other agreements already exist, as the
Right.
sheriff mentioned,
Yeah.
as a region, there is mutual aid across across counties, within a county, those things already exist. And so I think it was, hey, we may have a gap. There are other resources that entities have that others may need or have value in potentially sharing, if they so choose. Again, just because you're participating and then sign the agreement doesn't mean that if we get a call and says, can you send your cherry picker? If we can't do it, we can't do it. And there's no obligation to do it.
Right. So when it comes to emergency management, I kind of look at it as two different areas. When there's an emergency that happens, our first responders, police, fire, sheriffs, they respond with or without an agreement. I mean, it's more like try and stop me kind of a thing. I mean, that's just in their nature. They're going to respond. They're going to help each other out. That's how it happens. And ever since the invention of attorneys, we've been trying to codify this agreement. No offense to our attorney. We're trying to codify what emergency responses or mutual aid is all about. But nonetheless, once the initial rescue phase is over and it slowly shifts into a recovery phase, and it starts bringing into question your backhoes, your highway people, that kind of stuff. People that don't work as much in this mutual aid scenario, like our first responders do on a regular basis. It sounds like that's what they're trying to do is codify that a little bit more, a mutual aid for more of the recovery efforts than it is the first responders. Is that what you're seeing?
That is correct. From my perspective, bringing this forward to you, that is the piece of the pie that I think is missing, and that I think that's what they're trying to address. And so you're exactly right. Police, fire, ambulance, first responders, mutual aid is sort of in their DNA, and they certainly have opportunities in which they do that a lot across jurisdictions. When you're talking about other types of services that we have, well, we will do it. You're right, they're not necessarily as practiced or as experienced in doing that, and how does that work when you're talking about, I need, 3/4 pickup trucks, I need backhoes, I need things, I need equipment to get rid of the trees out of the street so that we can start moving and get back to some kind of normal sense.
Which is certainly something I think that we're all in favor of helping out our neighbor kind of a thing, but I always worry about agreements when we try to codify this kind of stuff. And I'd really like to have the input of, like we are tonight, our sheriff and Melissa and others, even Carl and others who will be involved in this. So this is more or less a take it or leave it agreement. This is it. We don't have a chance to go back and tweak this a little bit, or do we? Or
it's my understanding from Mark, they've gone through, they've vetted it, and this is, what they propose to everybody.
They vetted this, or they come up, but they had input from the county when they did this?
We were not, and as far as I know, unless Melissa was at the table, we were not at the table when they worked on this agreement.
So they put together this agreement, said this is what we want. We're not involved in this agreement, but now they've sent it to us and said, hey, will you agree to this agreement that you weren't involved with?
Right.
So, I mean, if I could just interject here. When you look at Mid-America Regional Council, and real quick, I just want to make it clear, I'm not trying to derail this effort. There's a lot of questions that I have. When you look at Mid-America Regional Council, I mean, they're exceptional in planning, and most emergency managers don't like planning. I mean, we're operations based. We're, first responders, operations. We know it's in our DNA. I mean, that's what we do. Mark actually comes in and does all the planning. And I almost think that this is, as a region, we have the THIRA. Okay, the THIRA, the Threat and Hazard Identification Risk Assessment. No one agency can do that by themselves. It's over 1,000 pages long. All right, so when we're talking about asset capabilities and allocations and just what can we do with it, I think this might be in addition to how we can support the THIRA. But when you look at Mark, I wish there was I wasn't prepared for this, but I would have put up the circle of friends. At one point, I was involved in 14 different committees at Mid-America Regional Council because there's a lot going on. And so, we have representation from all over. 119 cities is I think what we're at in Mark. So there's a lot of representation, a lot of people who have input. And even for those who can't add representatives, as a whole, the emergency managers and fire chiefs and the police chiefs in their respective committees kind of step in and say, hey, we know this situation, you know, because we work with them all the time. They may want to consider this, or we may want to consider this for them. So there's a lot of input that goes into this. But, you know, when you talk about regional efforts, I mean, I think we're kind of like the gold standard. Because I remember the Coast Guard actually asked me to go to the Quad Cities to watch their full-scale exercise on terrorism. And the number one thing that they failed at was communication. Well, if you look at our region, we're all on the 800 megahertz radio. And that was, you know, 911 is through MARC. I mean, so they do a lot of great work. So if this is something to support our already exhaustive efforts, you know, to make the Kansas City metro area safe or easy to respond to different incidents, then I mean, I'm in support of that. I just have a lot of questions about how we got to this point.
Here's my biggest concern is this is an agreement we've been asked to approve, but bottom line is, and no offense to my fellow commissioners, we're not the experts on this kind of stuff. Everybody's sitting over there are the experts. And I think this needs to be vetted through our experts here in the county before those of us, and that's what you guys are hired for. That's what you guys, and that's what you're elected for, to be the experts in whatever field, whether it's highways or whether it's first responders, whatever it is. We're not the experts on that. I mean, I have some expertise because I taught incident command system and emergency management, but just from a law enforcement perspective, you know, I never did anything with roads and bridges. So I need the experts to weigh in on this, in my opinion, before we vote on it. And that's why I wish would happen is it goes through our people, so that they're comfortable. And if they're not comfortable with it, I'd want to know that.
Before I go to Commissioner Lawson, I did have a question. So to kind of address the Core 4, the Core 4 does obviously possess a lot of resources, and they do exercise a considerable amount of influence within MARC. Do I understand that none of the 4 Corps have signed on to this, or am I mistaken?
Oh, that I don't know.
I don't know of the Core 4 who signed on or not. I just checked with Clay County, with our other Clay County partners, to see if they were participating in the program. I've not expanded beyond that. We certainly find out from MARC who all has already approved the agreement.
And I think I'll be having a conversation with my counterpart in Platte County. I think this is an issue I'd like to raise with him and get some information from Platte County and share that with the commission when I get some information on their take of this, since they have similar issues as we have up here.
Yeah, I was just informed Platte County has not. And it's only Wyandotte County, Kansas, Johnson County, Kansas. I think Lenexa is working on it.
They sent it to legal.
They sent it to legal. I do want to remind.
Olathe's approved it.
Oh, they have?
Olathe
Okay.
has, yeah.
Oh, Olathe has, okay. So as a kind of like a reminder, Clay County has our emergency operations plan. And it's about 700 pages, and that covers everyone within Clay County. So when we talk about mutual aid and incidents happening in Clay County, we've already got that set up. But to Commissioner Johnson's point, you know, when you go through each of the emergency support functions, there's 15 of them. ESF1 has to do with transportation. We don't create a plan and not ask our transportation partners if they can support. Everyone has to give a thumbs up. Can you support this? Yes. Can you support this? Yes. And so on. So when it comes to this, like I know I wasn't asked, but then again, I'm not at the meetings. I mean, I've got enough going on over here. However, Melissa Evans is a part of the meetings, and this is how she's able to present the information she has.
Commissioner Lawson, thank you for your patience.
No, not a problem at all. Always defer to our sheriff. The bottom line here is there evidently are a number of municipalities within Clay County that have not agreed to sign this agreement yet. I would like to have feedback from those entities as well as Platte County. I really would like to hear what they have to say about it. And I think we need to, I kind of briefly went over it before the meeting, but I'd like to really sit down and look at it strongly and see, you know, what we're getting into. I think we help each other. That's the Midwest way, you know, if you will. If there's a city in need, and the county was able to help, we go jump and help them. If Gladstone had a problem, our sheriff's going to go there, or anybody else that needed to go there. I just, to your point exactly, I mean, this is kind of like surprise. It would have been nice to have a little bit more. When you sit on the MARC board, do you not?
Executive board, yes.
Did you hear anything about this in advance?
Don't think this came up. We have an awful lot of things, but I don't recall this one coming up
Okay.
off the top of my head.
I just think that this is something that needs a little more looking into, a little more feedback. And then, you know, if everybody says go for the gusto, I'm right there with them. But I think we need to be just a hair cautious, find out what everybody else is doing, their feelings.
I think, let's see, Commissioner Johnson has asked to be recognized. I think we need to go ahead and start rounding this off and coming up with whatever instructions we are going to give to staff. With that, Commissioner Johnson, you're recognized.
Yeah, I just want to clarify my comments. I don't think that any of this was ill-advised or any ill intent in putting this together. I think there's some good intents to all of this and what they've done here. I just think the communication needs to be a little better, and communication, particularly among our experts on these different issues. It's all about communication as far as I'm concerned. I don't want people to think that I think they had some poor intentions on this.
So if I could clarify, so that's why it's on here for discussion, to bring forward to the commission to say, are you interested in pursuing this or not? So that's kind of why we're here today. It's certainly not saying, I would say from my perspective, as I'm the staff that said I would recommend doing this because I believe in mutual aid. I believe in, as Commissioner Lawson said, if an entity calls us and needs assistance and the county can help, then I am all for us doing that, even if it means crossing the state line. But I want to make sure all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted to ensure that our employees are protected and we know exactly what is going to happen if certain things happen. But it's here for discussion to see what the commission wants to do.
And I just want to emphasize, commissioners, I am not trying to derail this, okay? Like, I don't want to come across like, you know, because I've been involved with Mid-America Regional Council for a long time. They produce great results and they're great partners. You know, if this helps us improve our capabilities, then absolutely I want it. Having been the incident commander at actually I've responded to every single natural disaster and man-made disaster in Clay County for the time that I was the emergency manager, as well as liaison for the years before that. And there's nothing worse than trying to manage an incident and not having the resources you need, and then to be expected to call your partners when you're busy managing the incident. So if this helps us, man, I'm all for it.
Commissioner Wagner?
Thank you. And I appreciate those comments because it really lines up with whatever Article 1 purpose and scope says. It up front basically says that there are already mutual aid agreements and laws in place serving as the foundation for law enforcement, fire, emergency medical services. That paragraph seems to suggest you guys already got it. You've got something, right? And so I think where we are tripping up, and I'll say I'm one of those that's getting tripped up, because I tend to be one that says mutual agreement and mutual aid is always good. Why wouldn't we do that? But I think the problem in my mind is what then is left if the law enforcement and emergency management side is already covered. And for me, I think that's, and I'll reiterate the request from before, I think there may be some value just to have someone from MARC say, this is why you would want this. For instance, I think we're having problems filling in the blanks because there's not really an equivalent issue other than, it'd be nice maybe to trade some equipment around, and I would argue there's still some value to that. But I think we're having trouble pointing a finger at, well, if this was in place for an event like that, then this makes sense. And I think we're kind of absent that. So some explanation of that intent and an example of that intent, I think may be helpful. And for that matter, maybe that is an opportunity as we talk about some of our other municipal partners here in Clay County. maybe if someone from Mark can come and make that presentation, maybe we can ask some of our municipal partners to show up at 3 o'clock next week, if we can get someone from Mark, so that we can all hear, this is the for instance, this is why we have contemplated this.
And I can share with you, and that would be great, I can share with you in my personal experience, the RAPIO group, the Regional Association of Public Information Officers. In 2015, when we exercised, full-scale exercise in the entire KC metro area, our Complex Coordinated Terrorist Attack, CCTA, we needed PIOs. We had, if I remember correctly, we had 16 PIOs in Kansas City's Emergency Operations Center, and we still didn't have enough, right? Because you have all this information, especially with the advent of social media, and unfortunately, how we learned from this was the tornado down south. Joplin, good grief. So we learned that people took to social media and they were spreading disinformation, and it was actually hurting people who were affected by the tornado. And so we've learned that social media requires a tremendous amount of PIOs to watch Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all the other ones. And so what we had was we had multiple whiteboards on the wall, and we were tracking information, and we were passing it on to the lead PIO, who was then moving it on. So that was one experience of where we absolutely have to have something like this. Mutual aid, we have to help each other, because on mass scale incidents, mass fatality incidents, we're gonna need every single person that we can possibly get our hands on to help manage it.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Thank you. Obviously we're having a discussion this evening. I don't think we need to decide though this evening. It sounds like other cities and counties will continue to mull it over. We can continue to mull it over. I'm particularly interested to see if Kansas City is going to sign on. I think that is pretty relevant to whether or not this agreement makes a lot of sense, because obviously they're at the heart of the region here. So. And then in the meantime, too, everybody can read over the language as was suggested. And my request would be, similar to what Commissioner Johnson mentioned, which is if there's anything specific, any specific concerns that you have, that Director Evans has, that anybody from Highway Department or anybody else, if there's anything specific, I would be, if y'all could email that to us or whatever in terms of language that gives you concern. And if there's not any specific concerns like that, that's helpful to know as well.
Just because of how this has all played out over the years, what I would really like to see is a list of commitment from people even before signing this. Because we're waiting for cities and different entities to adopt it, but then what about everyone else? And so the conversations have always included multiple jurisdictions, but the curious part is who's all going to sign on for it. And so in essence, everyone's kind of sitting back going, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? But if we can get a list for commitment, and it's just going to take time and actually adopt it, then that'd be great to see.
So to clarify, by commitment, you just mean commitment to signing onto the agreement?
A commitment to sign, or maybe even to work toward signing, and whatever makes them feel good. Because, I think because how everything else is in place, I think it really boils down to what is our comfort level for our resources. And that means things and people. Right, so what's your comfort level? I think that's what it boils down to.
Thank you. Yeah, no, personally for me, because it's a voluntary agreement, and we're not committing ourselves to anything that would be beyond our capabilities. That is reassuring to me. That being said, I do think it makes sense to. Did I hear you correctly that the Johnson County has, or is going to sign it, or has agreed to it, or?
I think Melissa did that, yeah, I think
Okay.
they signed.
I mean, that's obviously.
I know some of the Johnson County cities have signed.
Okay.
And some, I think, did you say Wyandotte? So I think some of the other counties have signed. Whether Jackson has signed, I don't know. We'll certainly find out who has signed.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, finding out who all has signed or who's going to commit. But then my question is, and what if they don't, right? So we sign, and all we're committing to is we are willing to be, you call us, and if we can help you, we will help you. And we'll do it, we said we would probably do it even if we didn't have an agreement, which is what maybe some of the other agencies are saying. So,
Thank you. Yeah, no, I don't have any immediate discomfort, although, I appreciate hearing, y'all's perspective. And again, if there's anything specifically that is in, the agreement that gives you concern, I obviously, would love to know about it. My reason for wanting to wait on Kansas City, and frankly, Johnson County as well, is just, these are the biggest, governmental entities in the region, and if they're not signing, I would want to know why. What is causing them to not do so? Because they may know something that we don't in terms of concerns about the agreement. But like I said, I think we have time. I don't know that we have to decide tonight. We can.
Oh, this was not intended to decide anything.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah.
But.
And like I said, I came unprepared because I didn't know I was going to come up here. I had a brief discussion with Commissioner Lawson right before I came up here, and I'm like, okay, I'll do what I can.
With that, the sense I get from the commission is that we are not prepared to move at this moment. I think we would like to hear from a representative from Mark at some future meeting date that is convenient for them to come by and outline that. I think I'd also heard the suggestion that when we schedule that, we might issue invitations to those interested municipalities within Clay County to sit in. I don't know whether we would broaden that into a discussion that would include them in a large way. If we get into broader discussion, we might be thinking in terms of a special meeting. But I think we need to be looking at that. Also, I think it would also give time for our sheriff to come up with any contrasts and comparisons with our current situation and how this document would in fact impact what would be some of the upside, what would be some of the possible downsides that we would see, so that we can properly analyze and go forward. So does that reflect the commission's point of view?
But I think also to the earlier comment, staffs, just members of staff and their opinions from their departmental point of view.
Good point. Yeah, good. Yeah, also obviously the opinions of staff. I don't know that we have a specific timeline, although, sometime, we don't want to put it off till fall necessarily, but it's not a next meeting kind of a thing.
Yeah, as far as I know, the communication from Mark, there was no deadline asking entities, and so I think it's certainly whatever the commission's pleasure is. So we will see what we can arrange, getting all this information, and also who all has signed on so far.
Mr. Sheriff?
Yeah, one thing I want to add is Mark has never done anything in the way of it's either this or nothing, right? So I think with this resource effort, there's always going to be room to add on later, right? One thing that I would suggest for Clay County is to have a meeting with department heads, Melissa Evans, myself, and go over the document and then getting those thumbs up saying, hey, can we support this? I have not looked at the most updated version, but I'll get a copy of that and I'll take a look at it and I'll work with Melissa on our end. And then if we can get everyone together, we can have that conversation and potentially get those thumbs up. Be more than happy to do that.
As far as those operational kind of details, I have every confidence that our administrator will be able to put that together in preparation for the next time that we take up this issue. With that, if there's no further discussion, we will move on to our next discussion item. By the way, thank you for a very robust and I think interesting conversation. That brings us to August meetings, and that is the administrator. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you. So appreciate the commission's responding back on days of meetings and times of meetings, and I sent the results out to everybody, and basically the takeaway from the majority is status quo. Meetings will stay on Wednesday, first and third meeting will be at 3 o'clock, second and fourth meetings will be at 6 o'clock for the time being. I did also ask you about August meetings. There are 5 Wednesdays in August, and if there was a preference for which one that the commission may want to not have a meeting at, and gave some dates about when schools were going to start and to see. And as I had mentioned to the commission, it helps us from a planning perspective far in advance if we know when and when we're not having meetings, so we can schedule any kind of planning and zoning issues before the commission or anything with any of our applicants that come forward. And certainly now, as we're working towards scheduling outside individuals to do the invocation, it's very helpful to us to know what those dates are and try to get individuals scheduled. So with that, there was no consensus on August. We had 4 responses. and everybody picked a different day in August to suggest not to have a meeting. So I don't have consensus for you, so I wanted to bring it back before you to see if maybe there would be some thoughts and consensus on what you would like to do with August meetings.
I would, just to start off, and this doesn't have much to do with our personal schedules, but there are different things that occur during different parts of the year. Are there any of those meeting dates that would make it more difficult for us to transact county business, that we have to have certain meetings to where things are held? I'm also thinking in terms of, well, one of the things that occurred to me, and it came up several years ago, was during an August, some years ago, there was some contemplation to put something on the November ballot, and we were working with the deadline that we had to work within. So I guess one of my first questions would be, are there any considerations like that we should be taking into account?
So from an operational standpoint, of the 5 days, Wednesdays in August, the fifth Wednesday is August 30th, and because that is the day before the end of the month, my preference would be that for vendor payments, we would like to have a meeting that day because that's very close to the end of the month as we close out the month and pay our vendors. Now, if the commission chooses and that's the day that you would like to not have a meeting, we can make it work. But other than that, at this point in time, Commissioner Nolte, I'm not aware of anything time sensitive that will occur in August other than just sort of our end of the month process.
Very good. As far as accounts payable go, is there any, as you say, I do take your point that August 30, while it suggests itself as a date that we would not meet, but I do recognize the idea that we do have to keep up on our accounts payable. Is there any consideration we should be considering when it comes to that particular schedule?
No, that's why I was saying that I would, if a preference, we would recommend that you do have a meeting on August 30th, since it is technically very close to the end of the month. There's only 1 day left. So that would be one that we would recommend you do meet, but if you don't, we will make it work.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest, for purely selfish reasons, but I do have school-aged children, one of which I'm going to be shipping off to college during the week of August 16th, and I would suggest either for shipping off children to college or simply having that last family vacation, that either the 2nd, 9th, or 16th. So I'll give choices of 3. I won't even hone it down any more than that. I'll take any of those 3, whatever the pleasure of the rest of the group is.
Commissioner Johnson.
So I think I put down the 2nd, August 2nd, or I don't remember. I don't care myself. It doesn't matter to me either way. I do have kids, a little bit older, but my reason for August 2nd is it doesn't just impact the 7 of us, it's almost 20 of you sitting out there. And it's the middle of the summer. I figure August 2nd would be probably most convenient for most staff and who have kids. It's the middle of the summer vacations, that kind of stuff. So that's the only reason why I put down the 2nd. I'd actually really think it's important to have staff's input as well. Obviously, I mean, not tonight, but hopefully you consider that as well. But I don't have a preference. Whatever is good for the staff and everybody else is fine with me.
For staff's perspective, I would say, anytime before school starts is always better for staff because they too then can take advantage of a vacation with their family before school starts. From staff's perspective, just the sooner we know, the better it is for staff because then we can schedule appropriately.
I would also mention to commissioners that it would be preferable for us to leave this meeting with instructions to staff on a specific day. I don't have kids in school. I don't have any of those considerations. So let me just throw out August 9th. It's not the first month. It's not the first. Just so we have something to talk from. I have no particular connection to that day, but that way it allows us to meet early in the month. It doesn't, it's certainly well before school starts as far as I can tell. So just so we have a date to start speaking from, let's see it. What's the thought on August 9th? And please just go ahead and ring in and I'll recognize you as we go forward.
3rd. I think I'm the one that did. Because I'm sending my eldest is going to kindergarten. So it's going to be the first Wednesday where I only have that one kid at home. So it was exciting. He's gone. So, but it's fine. I can still come to work. It's fine.
Very well. Does August 9th seem to be what everyone can live with? That being the case, Administrator, if you would work on that basis, I believe we have consensus.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, well, that takes care of our discussion items. We have one report.
It's included in your packet was the monthly report from the county auditor for the cash basis ending March of 2023. And that was in your packets.
Thank you. That brings us to County Administrator comments. Administrator?
Thank you. Other than the next meeting for the commission is next Wednesday, August the 19th at 3 o'clock here in the chambers.
Very good. That brings us to Commissioner comments. We will start with Commissioner Wagner.
No comments. There you go.
I got you turned on and everything. Commissioner Lawson.
The only thing I want to say is it's so cold in here. My nose is cold. If I were a dog, I'd be healthy. It is freezing. We've got to get the air, this turned down. Either you're in your office and you're hotter than the hubs of Hades, or you're out here and you're freezing to death. Can we get this regulated? I'm cold.
Commissioner Withington.
I think they're making it cold to force me to wear long pants and not shorts. So earlier today, our social media team pointed out that 16-time WWE World Champion John Cena follows us on Twitter. But I would like to point out that fourth row, first one, Bill Kirsten, a former Clay County Commissioner, was the 17 years he was the he was the broadcaster for NWA Central States Wrestling. He was a former commissioner, former mayor of Liberty, and he was the guy who did the play-by-play for Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes in Kansas City, Kansas, when Ric Flair won his first ever world championship title. So some Clay County history there. And I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, But to serious business, MoDOT's getting ready to update their unfunded needs list. There's a lot that we could, that Clay County should be pushing for. I think in particular, we need to be pushing for 291 between Flintlock, where it turns from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, all the way to 435. I don't know what we need to do, but I think the commission should be pushing. Maybe we all sign a letter or something. I don't know what the process is, but we need to be pushing to have 291 added to the unfunded project list for the statewide transportation improvement plan. So.
Commissioner Carpenter.
No comments, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson. No comment. Commissioner Johnson. I think I will keep the good times rolling and have no comment either. That brings us to recess and adjournment. We are adjourned. Thank you.